To dig a little deeper into this, I spoke with Randall Mason. He teaches historic preservation and city and regional planning at the University of Pennsylvania. And I asked him how China is finding a balance between preservation and development.
I think it's incredibly important to find some balance, the right balance, specific to a culture, specific to an historical moment, in which there is some relationship between the trajectory of future development and the evolution of the city as represented in its historic buildings. Every city that is noted as a worthwhile place to visit or to locate your business or to live in is some sort of mix of historic buildings and contemporary buildings. So that shouldn't be a surprise that China is dealing with this, how to design the balance between historic structures and contemporary structures, just like every other dynamic, modern, growing city is.
Well, how have you seen preservation unfolding in China?
It's very dynamic at the moment. It's very changeful in response to the kinds of incredible development that's taken place in many Chinese cities in the last generation. One has to say, though, that there's actually a very long tradition in China of taking care of sacred sites, temples, other very important historic sites of one kind or another. So it's not as if preservation is having to be invented now, or certainly not invented according to just the kind of Western traditions of preservation. So building on this long tradition, China has been doing a more and more assertive job of trying to preserve not just individual landmark buildings in the traditional sense, or the Western sense, but whole neighborhoods and parts of cities. Certainly we've seen that in Shanghai and in Beijing in some measure. And actually the most recent and very interesting transformation is the attention that especially the national government has given to very large landscapes like the Silk Road landscapes, the Grand Canal, as very important representations of the history and evolution of China as a nation, as essentially an agrarian nation that has only very recently become an aggressively and assertively urban nation.
Well, let's go back to Shanghai. You touched on it. Talk to us about that city in terms of a heritage landscape.
It's a very, very rich heritage landscape, and I've been visiting there for years now, working with my students and with students and colleagues at Tongji University in Shanghai. There are a wonderful set of layers still existing in Shanghai through which you can read at least the last couple centuries of the city's history. Very tumultuous, very cataclysmic history in many regards. But the early 20th century and late 19th century Lilong neighborhoods, the charismatic buildings, including churches and factories and, of course, government buildings, early Western companies having their headquarters there, embassies. There's really an incredibly rich collection of historic buildings, historic sites, and even historic landscapes in today's Shanghai. And the preservation community and the government and academics have had a very vigorous conversation about exactly how to keep some sense of balance between the massive growth and the massively dense new growth in many parts of Shanghai and caring for these inherited environments, especially the Lilong blocks and the Shukumen houses.